Hey guys, it's Allie and welcome back to my channel. So today I thought I would try something a little different. I decided to sit down on my stool today and talk to you instead of standing up and talking to you. I was editing my video last week and my son asked me who was talking and I told him it was me and he said, "It doesn't sound like you at all, mommy. Your voice is really high pitched." So I thought if I did a video where I'm a little bit more relaxed, hopefully I can be a little bit more comfortable in front of the camera. I'm still trying to get used to that. So I thought I would try this out today and we'll see how it goes. But anyway, back to today's video. Today's video is going to be a recent reads video. So it's going to be talking about the books that I've been reading recently. So it's going to kind of be like a mini review for each book. Of course, spoiler free, I won't ruin any of the books for you, but I have 7 books here today that I had from this past month that I'm going to talk to you about. So let's go ahead and get into it. So these books I'm going to talk to you about, I'm going to talk about them in order of how I read them this past month. And the first book I read this past month was The Deep by Alma Katsu. So this book is kind of an historical fiction mixed in with some mystery and fantasy. In the book, we start out following Annie, but there's so many different point of views in the book, so you get to read from all different kinds of point of views. So some of the book is during the time when the characters were on the Titanic. And as we all know, the Titanic sunk from hitting an iceberg. But in this book, there might be a more mysterious reason as to why the Titanic sunk. And then later on, the people that did survive, Annie being one of them, she went on to work on the Britannic, which is the sister ship to the Titanic and was supposed to be unsinkable. So when I picked this book up at the library, I really had no idea about it. I hadn't heard anything about it, and I was just intrigued by the synopsis of it. And just thinking of the Titanic, I've never read a book that is about the sinking of the Titanic. Now, I've watched the movie Titanic, so I felt like I was comparing it to the movie somewhat throughout the book, but I just wasn't overly impressed with the book. I was kind of bored throughout it. At first, I thought that I might end up DNFing it, but there was always something that the author gave a little bit more of that wanted me to keep reading. Now, I will say the best part in the book for me was reading about the events while the Titanic was sinking, like what the characters were going through. But I felt like towards the end of the book, I just wasn't getting a whole lot of information about the characters, and some of the point of views that I had read from, I didn't end up finding out what happened to those characters. So I felt like it was kind of pointless to get attached to them, not knowing what had actually happened to them. So I gave this book 2 out of 5 stars. I wouldn't really recommend to read it unless that just is the kind of book that you really like. It's very slow paced. There are a lot of things in the book that are kind of up in the air, so you kind of have to think out of the box a little bit and trying to figure out, because the author never ends up telling you exactly what something is or what it wasn't. So it's just kind of one of those books that you have to actually be very interested in that type to actually enjoy that reading experience. The next book I read was The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. And I absolutely loved this book. Now, there's been a lot of hype to this book. This book came out last year, and I finally just read it this past month, and it was so good. Now, a lot of people were saying that they were bawling, crying. It was just very emotional. Now, I can get that some parts of it were emotional. I didn't find myself overly emotional about it, but I was definitely connected to the characters and very interested in what was happening to them. So in The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, we follow Addie, and Addie made a deal with the darkness in the 1700s. Now, this deal was so that she could live her life and do what she wanted to do as a woman, not having to settle down and marry someone. So she wanted to live forever until she could have all the experiences she wanted to have. But the downfall of this deal was that no one would ever remember her. She could have experiences with someone or have a conversation, meet with someone every single day, and they would never remember her as soon as she walked away. So Addie went through life and no one was remembering her until one day she met someone and they did remember her. This book was so good. I would recommend this to anyone who's interested in adult fantasy. It's not like a heavy fantasy series. Kind of reads like a contemporary, just with that little fantastical element to it of her living forever. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. It's definitely one to pick up and read. V. Schwab did a great job writing this book. Everything was really thought out, and there was no like plot holes or holes in the deal that Addie made about living forever and her not being able to be remembered by someone. You would think that you could find different plot holes in that deal itself, but V. Schwab thought through everything and it was seal proof. And the whole story was just really good. To even have the idea for this kind of story and that concept and to follow through, it probably took a lot of thought for her to figure out everything in this story. I believe that she was writing this story over a 10-year period, but it was well worth that time. This book is so good. Definitely pick it up. The next book I read was An American Marriage by Tiare Jones. And this book is about a Black married couple and the husband is falsely accused of committing a crime. Now, I want to warn you, there is a trigger warning for rape in this book. So if that is something that is sensitive to you, don't pick up this book. But this book was interesting. I am still trying to decide exactly what I want to rate it. I don't think the writing was bad. I think the writing was good in the story. So I don't want to give it a terrible rating. It just felt like it was lacking. There just wasn't much to it. In the beginning, the writing was letters between the husband and the wife and any other characters that were in their life at the time, which that was my favorite part of the story. I thought the letter writing was really good and very interesting. And you got to see the feelings of everyone in the story and not just the husband and the wife. And you could kind of see how their relationship changed throughout that certain time period just by reading those letters. But after the letter writing was over, I just felt like I wasn't getting connected to the characters through this writing. And I wasn't really overall interested in their outcome. And I felt like I couldn't really connect to the wife. I was going into this book, I was really interested to see how the wife felt about her husband being falsely accused and how she lived life while he was in prison. And I just wasn't overly impressed with her view on things. I don't know if it's just because it's something that I wouldn't do if I was in that circumstance. Maybe I just don't understand. She had only been married for 1.5 years when he went to prison. So her reaction might be a little bit more understandable. I just don't know. I just don't know how to feel about the book. I don't know that helps you any, but I'm just a little confused about the book. I'm stuck between like a 2 to 3 star. It wasn't overall that great. I wouldn't go pick it up again. I was just expecting more from that storyline. I was expecting more from the characters and to the husband being falsely accused. The story was more about the relationship after he got out of prison, and the majority of the book just spans 2 days. I felt like I just wanted more of the act and what happened up to him being accused of being guilty and sent to prison, and then more so of his life in prison and their relationship throughout that time. I just was expecting a little bit something different from the story. Take from that what you will, but overall the story was just lacking. It was just lacking more in depth. I felt like the author could have given us a lot more to it. The next book I read was Too Good to Be Real by Melanie Johnson, and this book actually doesn't release until July of 2021. I got this book off of NetGalley. It is an adult romance novel, and it follows a journalist, and she goes to a retreat to review this retreat for the website that she writes for. This retreat is typically a retreat for couples, and it is based off of rom-coms. So they try to reinvent a rom-com experience for couples or singles who are trying to find a significant other. Now, the main character in this book, the journalist, she's very skeptical of love, and she's not sure that this rom-com thing is really going to work out. The male main character in this story is a coder, and he coded the whole rom-com experience. Now, in the beginning of the book, he runs into this journalist, and he thought that it would be a good idea to go undercover and be part of the rom-com experience as a guest. Now, as you can guess, this is an adult romance, so there is that romance between the journalist and the computer coder. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. I thought it was a very cute book, and I loved the idea of a rom-com retreat. I thought that was very interesting, and it references so many rom-com movies too. But the only reason I didn't give this book 5 out of 5 stars was that it was very cheesy and it was kind of like insta-love, which I'm not a huge fan of. I feel like you're not gonna actually fall in love with someone the very first day that you meet them. And this retreat spans over just 1 week. It's just really, really cheesy when it comes to that. So just know that going into the book that it is very cheesy, but it is a good book. I think it's just, if you wanted a fun, lighthearted romance to read, this is the book for you. The next book I read was The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. And this book is about 2 twin sisters who lived in a southern city called Mallard. And this city was full of light-skinned Black people who could pass as being white, but they always considered themselves as being Black. And they're very prejudiced of people who were darker than them, but they were also against people pretending to be white. Now, these sisters escaped this town and left, and one sister ended up passing as white, and her husband and her family had no idea that she was actually Black. And the other sister ended up marrying a very dark Black man and then returned back to the hometown of Mallard. Now, I was very surprised about this book. It was not only from the twin sisters' point of view, but you also read the view from a lot of the other people that they touched in their lives. It was just such a good book. I heard that HBO has picked up this book for a little mini series, so I'm super excited to see that and see how they interpret this story. But it was just so good. I loved the writing. The writing was really good. Now, in the beginning, I was a little confused just because the way that the writing is and then the way that she switches point of views between characters. She doesn't switch point of views like every chapter like it seems like a lot of books do, but it can happen in the middle of a paragraph and you're switching the point of views of someone. But as soon as you get used to the kind of writing it is, I got the hang of it and it was so good. I would definitely suggest this for anyone to pick up. It's such a great story. What American Marriage lacked in in-depth writing, The Vanishing Half definitely had more than enough. The writing was so in-depth. I just loved the whole book. The book is in historical fiction. It starts in the mid-1900s and then goes up to the 1990s, I believe. So it's not that historical, but it is still considered historical fiction. I gave The Vanishing Half 5 out of 5 stars. It was just a great story. After The Vanishing Half, I really wanted to pick up a book that was just a little lighthearted, and I really wanted to read a fantasy, so I picked up The Goose Girl by Shannon Hale, which is a middle grade novel. And this book is a retelling of a Grimm's fairy tale. The original Grimm fairy tale is about a girl who turned into a goose before she could become a queen. Now, in this story, Annie is a princess who is marrying the prince of a rival kingdom, and she travels there, and a lot of things happen on her way over there and when she gets to the kingdom. So she kind of has to find her way back to what she was meant to do when she got there, but she finds herself on the way. She never felt like she fit in as a princess in her own court, but when she moved to this neighboring kingdom, that she belonged there with the people. So not only is this book about royalty and kind of a coming of age story for Annie, but it also has some fantastical elements to it. So Annie can talk to birds and she can learn the different languages of all different birds. But in this world also, there are people who can speak to the wind, fire, earth, and water. And so it kind of adds that little bit of a fantastical element in there. Now, I don't think that that element is a huge part of this story. I think overall it's more of a coming of age, but the fantastical elements that they add in there are just that much more interesting. I gave The Goose Girl 5 out of 5 stars. It was such a good book. It'd be a great story to read to middle schoolers. The coming of age story for Annie is just so good, and the fantastical elements are a great addition to it. In The Goose Girl, it teaches just some life lessons that we can use too in our world here. The last book I want to talk about is Slay by Brittany Morris. And this follows our main character, Kiara, and she is a computer coder. And she creates this gaming world, Slay, by herself because she wants a world where she can game being Black without being called names or having any prejudices against her. One day, a boy in Kansas was murdered over the game Slay, and Kiara has to deal with all the issues that come with that, both personal and with things that are going on outside in the world. This was such a great teenage story. I think this would be a great book for a 16, 17, 18-year-old to read. The gaming details in it were so immersive. You felt like you were actually in the game. It was very detailed. This book has the interesting plot line of this virtual reality game. Sorry, let me pause. My cat is over here playing with the cord to my light. So this is my cat Comet. He's 9. He's mad at me now because I took him away from playing with my light cord. Can I get back to doing my video now? Will that be okay? Anyway, Slay is a good book. I think it teaches a lot of life lessons. Not only does it talk about the virtual reality storyline, it talks about a lot of race issues and how that looks for people growing up and trying to find themselves and find themselves in their world. The character struggles with trying to become a strong, confident Black woman and representing her race, but also trying to be the person that her parents want her to be. I gave Slay 5 out of 5 stars as well. I would definitely suggest reading this. So those are all the books that I read in February. Make sure to comment down below if you've read them and let me know what you thought about them. I'll link all the books that I talked about today down below in case you want to check those out on Amazon. My social media accounts will be linked down as well. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon if you want to be notified when I post new content. Thank you so much for watching my video today. I'll see you next time. Bye.